But really, how do you feel when you sit into the cockpit, behind the driver's seat of a Formula One? I couldn't think of a better man to describe it and to take us through that feeling and explanation so that you at home can actually try and put yourself in behind the driver's wheel in the 45th Australian Grand Prix. The feeling of the wheel, what is around you, and what does it all mean? Jackie Stewart will tell you.
I'm sitting in Alan Jones's very naked Williams. They've taken the bodywork off it so we can see what the driver has to deal with inside his racing car. First of all, it may look very cramped inside this car, and of course there's not much space, but it is very comfortable. The seat of a racing car, of course, is molded to the driver's body, much in the same way as you might take 4 or 5 fittings for a good suit to be made in Savile Row in London. You have to get an expert to make your seat. It molds into your body, and it might take 5 or 6 seats before you get the one that's truly comfortable for the full length of a Grand Prix. The steering wheel, of course, is a lot different than you would experience in your normal family car. A lot smaller, obviously, for the reasons of the confinement of the cockpit it has to be. On the steering wheel, there's a switch here. It's called the kill switch. If the driver, for example, has a throttle stick open with him, he can immediately kill the engine by switching that upwards, and that, of course, can save a major accident. The gauges that a driver has to look at in a Formula One car, the main gauge right in front of him here is the Rev Counter. That's to say the engine speed. Now, this Ford V8 engine revs here at a maximum of 10,800 revs per minute. That's RPMs. On the left-hand side is his water temperature gauge, and that would normally read around about 90 degrees centigrade or even up to 100 if it's very hot. The right-hand gauge is the red needle there is his oil pressure. That would run around 60 pounds per square inch, or 3 on this metric gauge here. The fuel pressure is the white needle on the right-hand side, and that would run up to about 80 pounds, which would be 6 on this particular meter here. There are other things he has to look for. Up here is in the case of fire. If the car catches fire, Alan Jones could flick that switch, or, for that matter, one of the rescue people who would come to assist him could set off this fire extinguisher, which goes around the cockpit as well as the engine compartment, hopefully putting out the fire. Now, of course, he has a gearbox, the same as you have in your car. So does Alan Jones have one. In this case, it's a 5-speed gearbox. Down and back here for first, third, fourth, up and fifth here right at the back. Reverse is across and forward. He has 3 more switches here. A fuel pump which he can put on here, and this is usually only used to go out of the pits in the case of slow running. He has an isolating switch here for this fuel, for this fire extinguisher, just in case somebody sets it off by mistake. This can be used while staying around in the pits. This bottom switch here is for a rear light. Now, you may say they don't drive in the dark in racing cars, but if it were to rain here at the Australian Grand Prix, the amount of spray that's put up by these very wide tyres almost make it impossible for a car behind to see how close the car in front is. There's a high-intensity light that is fitted to the back of the car, and if rain were to come, Alan Jones would then switch this light on, and therefore the car following him could have the opportunity of seeing how close he is. There are other things that he has to deal with. Over on this side of the cockpit, there's a little wheel here. Now, this is to change the brake balance. When the fuel level of the car goes down, the driver sometimes needs to change that brake balance. He would turn it to the left if he wanted more braking to the front of the car, turn it to the right if he wanted more braking to the rear of the car. One other thing over here is to adjust the rear roll bar, or the sway bar if you like to call it that. It can make it firmer and harder by pulling this knob out and pulling it towards the rear. And that would make the car a little more light-headed in the back end if he wanted a little oversteer. That's to say, if he wanted the back end to slide. On the other hand, if he pushed it forward, it would make the car softer, perhaps, and it would grip more at the back. He also has something over here. If he were, for example, to spin out on the racetrack and come to a stop, he might have to restart his engine if it had stalled, and it would probably be difficult to do so. There's an air bottle in the back that operates an air starter to give him a better chance of getting his car restarted. Some other things here. This pipe here is a medical air supply. Now, this is in the case of fire again. It gets fitted onto Alan Jones's helmet, and that pipe goes into this here. And what happens is that medical air is supplied for about 45 seconds, and it's really a survival cell for that period, so that the rescue crew can have time to get Alan Jones out and the fire put out that may be around him. And in the meantime, he's not inhaling flame or hot air that could certainly kill him. He also has a communication set up in his helmet also, this one here, so that when he comes into the pits and he needs to speak to his chief mechanic, they can do so and hear each other without Alan having to take his helmet off. As you can see, I'm wearing seat belts. Just as you all should wear seat belts in your road cars, Alan Jones knows to wear seat belts. In this case, there are 6-point fittings, 2 over the shoulders, 2 round the waist, and then 2 through between his legs to stop something called submarining. That's to say, if there were a head-on accident, he would slide down underneath the cockpit. And these underneath here and between his legs stop him from going down low in the cockpit. So safety is very much thought of in Grand Prix racing today for the driver in his cockpit. So that roughly is what a driver has to do when he's in doing his business in his office.